Good day and welcome to our Open Science Cafe lecture organized by the Service Center Research Data Management here at the University of Bonn. My name is Sergey, and today, as the title suggests, I will talk about the privacy and security aspects in research. Of course, it's impossible to cover all the aspects in such a short presentation, so in this talk we will really concentrate just on the research data management in this context. Unfortunately, scientists do not always pay enough attention to these aspects because we think that we have nothing to hide or no one is interested in our data, and even if no one would understand it without the research context that we are working on. And of course, we are handling my data carefully anyway and do not need additional technical protection. However, if we look outside in the news line, we find that there are different cases. PG students claim that the supervisor steal their research data. Yeah, that happens. Also, the data can be stolen by the peers in the research project or some guest researcher. This also has happened. The scientists often are not careful enough with their hardware. They lose, for example, a laptop. This happens also to politicians, as we know, and losing a USB stick is even easier. There is a known case of the AOL search lock release. This is a data set from AOL which contained search queries on their engine. And after the release of the data, they realized that some of the persons involved, some of the searchers could be re-identified, so the data was not secured enough. They realized it and removed the data from the internet, but of course it was already too late. And this data set became public. Some people got fired, and the data set became one of the most used data set in information retrieval, the community. Of course, we should not forget the attackers. For example, ransomware, which is intended to encrypt your data and to blackmail for it. They could also publish your data, and imagine they would publish your research data, especially if you are researching maybe on medical records, right? And indeed, the medical records are very popular for being attacked. The healthcare data breaches hit from time to time the heights, and in 2021, around 45 million people were affected. Also, universities are getting attacked. Here's an excerpt of the attacks of the last years, but of course this is just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, what are the main threats for insecure handling of research data? Of course, first of all, the results can be published by someone else against of our own research. If we use data from third parties, then and we lose it, or the data get misused, then we can lose also the trust of this organization and may never get from them the data again. Overall, we can unintentionally or accidentally harm our career and that of our colleagues if we do not handle the data properly. We will consider now the data handling at the most important steps in the research data lifecycle, and we start with the data collection. Here we talk about the privacy, and privacy is a legal framework around the usage of the data. You should know what data are you collecting. Does it contain any information related to the person or some confidential data? Care about the agreement and license you have on this data and on the results that you will produce. You should know or it should be regulated what is allowed and what is not allowed, with whom the data may be shared, where the data is stored and how long it will be kept. Remember that even if a data set has been already used in other research contexts, this absolutely does not mean that you are allowed to use it on legal basis. Generally, the research data should be kept in European Union and not leave European Union. In the ideal case, it is kept on the servers of the university, and G Drive or Office 365 are not the option. Before you start your research project, you can ask for support by the Service Center Research Data at the University of Bonn, by our Service Center, our team. We are not allowed to do any legal consulting but we will support you and can identify the persons with whom you should talk. So the next step in the data lifecycle is data processing. Here we talk about the security, so the technical protection of the data. You need to protect the data against the unauthorized access. Always separate private and business devices. Do not put business data on private devices, and you're also not allowed to put institutional VPN, for example, on mobile devices. Think about encryption. You should use good passwords. The good passwords are long, complex, and are different for each account and dataset. In the best case, the passwords are generated randomly. Also here, please consult the Service Center research data for support and for tools. The final step in the data lifecycle is data publishing. When you publish your research results, determine that you can really legally publish this data. Doesn't matter if raw or processed data. Before you publish, remove sensitive information, anonymize the data, de-identify if personal information is involved. Remember the AOL example. When you describe the data, do not only describe the contents, but also metadata like who created the data, who collected it, what license is involved if someone would like to use it, and so on. Also consider watermarking the data so you can re-identify it if in case it would be misused in other contexts. Please choose suitable repository and license. Good repository allow different levels of access and full control about the access of your data, so you identify who can see which parts of the data. Sometimes it's advisable not to publish bytes at all and only the metadata about the records. Also, if you use third-party data, consider the previous licenses on this. Before you publish the data, you can consult our Service Center for tools and services. We suggest to divide your data into 3 classes. C1, public data, C2, sensitive data. This is the data which you would like to share with someone. And C3, protected data. Example of public data are published papers, information that is already available on public websites, or data sets that are already published. But remember, you need to consider the proper license. You need to follow the license. For examples for C2 sensitive data are teaching materials, research that is in progress, for example, research proposals, but also raw data, administration data, be careful with personal information here is involved, and the source code. C3 data needs to be protected additionally. This is the data which is related to individuals, like biometric data, credit card details, geolocation records, but also passwords and private keys and certificates. If you process C2 sensitive data in different tasks, you should consider when you print it, do not leave unattended on copiers and printers, and be careful with USB sticks and mobile devices. When you store files, the computer where you do it must meet university security requirements. This includes device password, strong enough, antivirus software, current patches, encryption, and so on. USB, if you store the data on external drives like USB sticks or backup tapes, then the data should be encrypted. If you share files, use approved collaboration tools and always share with specific individuals. Some tools allow anonymous links or links without passwords. Please do not use them. Always mark the data as protected when you share it with watermarks, and put a confidential token into file names. We'll show on the next slides how it can be done. And always supply a data license if you share the data. If you send the data over networks, then the connection should be encrypted, and you can use email encryption and email signature if you would like to send the data over email. For setting up the email client, you can also consult our Service Center. If you delete files, do not forget to empty trash bin if the files are sensitive. In case of C3, additionally to that, you need to consider if you store the files, Never store it or copy such data on your work or personal computer in an encrypted form. The data should remain within secured managed system, or it should be always encrypted if you want to store it on some external media. If you share files, use only security cleared share points on network location. Do not use public networks. Share files only with named individuals, as we already mentioned. If you delete a file, then you need to additionally use a tool which would overwrite the old bytes and completely remove it. Other advices of handling on sensitive data is to consider least privilege access. That means that if you share the data, you should share only the amount which is needed for processing it, not more. After you used, analyzed, processed C3, C2 data, it's advisable to delete it right after this use. For C2 data, watermark when shared. If you would like to share your data as read-only, consider converting the textual data into images. If your data has information about particular persons, then consider data anonymization in addition to encryption and access restriction. And here's one example how this watermarking would look like. Here's a textual file, and yeah, it's impossible to overlook that it is confidential if you open it, and also in the file name, the token confidential determined that the file should be handled with care. This way, the person whom you would share the file with would always know that it's confidential, and the probability that the person would accidentally share it will decrease. And here's an example of data anonymization. On the left side, we see original data table of some toy medical record with name, age, and disease of a patient. And on the right side, the same data is anonymized. Of course, we need to remove the names from the data, the clear names, but it's not enough usually. And in this case, we also blur the age. Anonymization of the data is a complex process which should be done by experts, because there is also a trade-off in anonymization and usability of the data. If you have questions, please consult our service point. And here in summary, a short checklist for different steps in the research data lifecycle: collection, processing, and publishing. When you collect the data, make sure that you're allowed to use it, and ensure all the legal aspects of data usage, and also consider the data ethics. When you process the data, be sure that you are in full control over the data usage. Divide this data into 3 levels, C1, C2, C3, and consider these levels when do data processing. Anonymize, encrypt, and watermark the data if the data is sensitive. When you publish the data, then you need to be aware that you will not be able to change anything later. Make sure that you can legally publish this data and your research results, and choose a proper repository and license. And a good idea is to consult our service center for tools and support. Here's a list of tools that we would recommend for data sharing, for email encryption, for password management, and so on. Here are the material references and credits for additional information about the topic. And I would like to announce our next CAFE lecture in a month from now, where Dr. Eva Bress will talk about the way the science should not be done. Thank you very much.